Добрый день всем, здравствуйте.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are prepared to start in about 2 minutes. We will be taking stock of the year with President Vladimir Putin. You know that this is a blended format. I'd like to remind you of that this is a blended press conference and a hotline with the president. As for a conversation of the president with you, with the media, will be moderated by me, your humble servant, or by the president himself, as he often does. As for the conversation of the president in the hotline and him responding to the calls and appeals of the citizens will be moderated by my colleagues and friends, Yekaterina Berezovskaya and Pavel Zarubin. I'd like to ask you, when you're asking your question here, please stand up. You'll be given the mic. Please say who you are, what media you're representing, and the microphone will be held by my colleagues who are helping us out today. I'd be very thankful if you put your mobile phones on silent. Thank you. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Peskov. We've been receiving questions for 2 weeks straight. Indeed, they came in from all over the country, a tremendous amount of calls. All of Russia is speaking directly, honestly, and frankly. This tremendous number of calls and appeals made us, together with Yekaterina, look at thousands of pages of your questions. We looked through tons of videos. Indeed, the past 2 weeks seem to be the largest poll all over Russia. We felt not only as journalists together with Pavel, but also as sociologists. It is natural that it's impossible to answer these millions of questions, all of them. But there are common topics. What is the main topic? The main one is special military operation. Our military servicemen are writing to us, all things considered, benefits, payments, and so on. And we'll talk about that in detail, naturally. Also, traditional, popular questions such as utilities, sports, and many others. So we're prepared to kick off. Well, this year, right at the very stage of gathering all the questions, we engaged the National People's Front, so there is no doubt that all of the calls and appeals will be processed and will not remain unanswered. The activists of NPF are prepared to do that. However, the most relevant and interesting questions will be voiced today. Yesterday, a question came in about the salary not being paid, and salary was paid actually that very day in the evening. There are plenty of questions that are yet unsolved, and the thing is that we're living in a world that's completely different, and people are worried not only about social matters. It is now, before the new year, it's time to take stock of the year. December is traditionally filled with many events. Last week, Mr. President, you've announced your decision to run for president. In this, against this background, what kind of attacks do you have abroad and domestically? What are the main questions for you? Well, I spoke about that many times, but it bears repeating now. For such a country as Russia, the very existence of our country without sovereignty is impossible. It will simply not exist, at least in in the state that it exists now and existed for thousands of years. So the main thing is to strengthen the sovereignty. However, it's a very broad term. External sovereignty, that means strengthening our military power and security and safety on our borders. Strengthening our social sovereignty, public sovereignty. That means absolute observation of the rights and freedoms of our citizens, of strengthening our political system, parliamentarism, and finally, that is providing security and sovereignty in economic and technological sphere. Well, I don't think that in responding to this question, I don't need to cover all of these matters, but I'm quite positive that the audience that we have here and the rest of the country is fully aware that Russia cannot exist without it. Financial, economic, and technological sovereignty is the future of any country, including Russia. So if we talk in concepts, these are the main dimensions. Let's turn to economy. Many in the world have been surprised that the Russian economy did not collapse under the burden of the so-called pressure, sanctions, pressure from our former so-called partners. But it's apparent that they have the goal to push Russia to the limit and to make it buckle. So what kind of resilience does the Russian economy have? It's resilient enough not to only feel quite confident, but to move forward. And this resilience, well, we've discussed it many times as well, but I'll repeat myself. That is ensured by several components. The first one, and the most important one, is the tremendous consolidation of the Russian society. The second thing is sustainability of financial and economic system of the country. It came as a surprise to our so-called partners, and honestly to many of us as well, that over the past decades, Russia has gained this resilience and sustainability in finance and economy. And the third component, naturally, is greater capacity of our forces, security forces and the army. And if we talk about the economic indicators, specific indicators, what can we be proud of? Well, as per usual, I brought a table over. There is nothing special that we don't know, but I think that yesterday, Finance Minister voiced several indicators yesterday. The main indicator is growth of GDP, of our economy, at the end of the year is expected at 3.5%. That is a good indicator. That means that we bounced back from the dip last year. I think we stood at 2.1%. If this year we gained 3.5%, that means we bounced back and made quite a significant step forward. Unfortunately, we have inflation growth. That is so, and we expect 7.5% at the end of the year, maybe even higher, reaching almost 8%. The central bank and the government are taking all the necessary measures, and we can discuss that later. We can talk about the increase in interest rates and so on, other measures that the central bank and the government are undertaking, and we hope that we can go back to the targeted level of inflation. Industrial production is growing confidently, 3.6%, but what's especially makes us happy, manufacturing 7.5%. That is year-on-year growth. This is an unexpectedly high rate. And what makes us especially positive is 10% growth investment into main capital, fixed capital. That means that today we have apparent growth in GDP and industry, plus 10% in fixed capital investments. That means that midterm we have ensured our sustainable growth. There will be new jobs created, expansion of industry, and so on. As for unemployment, I'll speak about that later. The profit stands at 24% of the industry, let alone banks. They are going to earn almost 3 trillion rubles, even more. Of course, I know that in this audience and from around the country that, yes, the banks are doing fine. They're going through fat years. But those people who are storing their money in Russian banks. That's good news for them, the sustainability of the Russian banking and financial system. Now on to real wages. It's going to increase by about 8% year on year without inflation.
Well, this will not be a universal picture across the country, but more or less these are specific, precise statistics, and the real disposable incomes of our people will also be growing. There are more components therein, but it's going to be about 5% growth. The unemployment rates. Recently, we were proud of record low levels of 3% of unemployment, and yesterday, while getting ready for today's talk, we saw that it stood at 2.9%. We've never seen that low unemployment before. This is a very good integrated or aggregate parameter of the overall economic performance. When I spoke about the real disposable incomes rise, I must mention that starting from the 1st of January, we will increase the minimum wage by 18%, which is not something that we do frequently. The public debt has been shrinking, which also testifies to the macroeconomic and financial stability. The public debt slumped from 46 to 32 billion USD, and the private external debt also has dwindled. All our companies have been repaying on schedule. It went down from $337 billion to 297. So the repayment is on time, sometimes even ahead of schedule. Well, the aggregate social parameters also, we'll talk a lot about social and welfare matters today, but there is a comprehensive parameter of the life expectancy growth. In 2021, the life expectancy in this country was 70.06. In 2022, 72 and 73.73. And in 2023, we expect the life expectancy at 74 years, so which is an indicator showing that we are doing fine in terms of our welfare and social policies and economic policies. The other day, you awarded some of the heroes of Russia, and you said that the guys should be spared, but we should continue pressing for 2 years. We have been living amidst the special military operation, so we receive a spate of questions from everybody on that. What is your take on these 2 years? What is the current pace? What the goals may be? Are they the same or have they changed? And when we will arrive at peace? The peace will come when we reach our goals that you have mentioned. And coming back to the goals, they remain unchanged. I will remind you, it means denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine and its neutral status. Let's have a look from the perspective of denazification. During the negotiations that followed after the preparation of a draft of possible agreement back then, that was mentioned by the Kiev authorities the other day. Well, on the whole, they did not agree. They needed some denazification, saying that there was no Nazism growth in that country. Well, how come their national hero is a well-known Nazi figure, Bandera, who has been proclaimed a national hero? How come that? Yes, they do have it. And when today's head of presidential office in Kiev, before the whole world gives a round of applause to a former SS soldier that participated in Holocaust, which was the extermination of 1.5 million of Jews, Poles and Russians, and he gave him a standing ovation. Is it not a manifestation of Nazism? So denazification is a relevant thing. During those talks, we were told that, well, actually they would not rule out enacting some legal acts. That was during that series of talks in Istanbul. Now, with respect to demilitarizing Ukraine, unless they want to come to terms peacefully, we have to take some action, including military action. But today, Ukraine virtually produces or manufactures nothing. They have been trying to maintain their manufacturing capability, but, actually they have been importing things for free, freeloading. But, it will come to an end sooner or later. Well, they will keep receiving some aid, but, the annihilation continues. With respect to aircraft and air defense systems, they received like 420 or 30 tanks, as had been promised. Everything had been delivered. I mean, all the things that the Westerners had promised were supplied, but all of that was annihilated. 747 tanks were destroyed as of last night. Since the start of the counter-offensive, around 2,300 armored personnel vehicles of different types. So this is demilitarizing. Either we come to terms on the specific military parameters, and we did agree upon these parameters that were put into the litter bin later. And so we have other opportunities, either to come to terms or to have our way compellingly. Well, a short question, a brief question, where there will be a second wave of mobilization. I know it is a sensitive matter. So look, we had some partial mobilization. We recruited 300,000 people. And at the outset, there was a great deal of irony and derision. They were called recruits, but they have been doing an excellent job. Now we have 14 heroes of Russia out of those people recruited back then. And a lot of other decorations also were awarded to them. So now around 244,000 people, servicemen, are in the operation area. Regiments have been formed to service the military equipment, because there are a lot of very good professionals. Around 41,000 people have been dismissed because of reached the age limit or have some health problems. And after that, we started a broad campaign to attract volunteers to sign contracts with the armed forces. And we planned to recruit 400-something thousand people. As of last night, I was informed that 486,000 people have been recruited, and the inflow of men that are ready to defend their motherland with arms is not dwindling. 1,500 every day, up and down the country. So, together with the volunteers, well, a contract is signed for 2 or 3 years term by the so-called volunteers, although all these are the warriors of their fatherland. Well, there are yearly terms, but it's going to be around 500,000 of people till the end of the year. Why do we need another wave of mobilization? No need of that currently. If you allow me, I remind you that we have a blended format of a hotline and a press conference. So probably, if I may, just a second, I apologize. Well, actually, we have a democracy here. Now, just Mr. Peskov, Please proceed. Will you give her a mic? The mass media are hectic people. My name is Lyudmila Kuleva. I represent North Ossetia Republic, region number 15. Mr. President, North Ossetia has always stood guard of the interests of our country. Ipsatlev, Hadjirat Mansurov are the warlords and the heroes of the Soviet Union that obtained glory during the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War. Now, many residents of North and South Ossetia and all the North Caucasus uphold the interests of our motherland. We have a lot of volunteers. We have 2 volunteer squads, Storm Ossetia and Alania. And today, the contracted servicemen receive a lot of benefits and support measures, whether the volunteers can also expect to receive those allowances. You know, I have looked through the questions. Well, definitely there is a huge spate of them. It is impossible. 2.1 million of questions. Well, Mr. Peskov brought in a huge pile, a thick pile of questions, and I looked them through. I reiterate my position. Well, we may have more questions of that kind. All the volunteers, all those bearing arms and defending the interests of this country, risking their lives and their health, will enjoy the level playing field, the equitable conditions. There are some flaws, we know about them. And yesterday I analyzed the letters and I spoke to the defense minister and head of the general staff and Madam Golikova, the deputy prime minister in charge of the warfare. So on some of the matters we'll have to amend the legislation. Probably we'll come back to that during the press conference. I'm sure that the members of parliament will definitely certainly support that, and we need to put it in proper language, and everybody should receive equitable support, equal support from the state. I know Storm Ossetia and Alania are brilliant warriors, and the head of that region told me about that. And this is the pile I have selected. Well, the certificates of war veterans issues, and let's receive a video question. Sergei Sobolev from Novosibirsk phoning in, the city of Asketin. Mr. President, good afternoon. It's a huge privilege and an honor to speak to you from Donbass. We are very far from the front line, and you can hear the warfare well enough. The Storm Brigade of the Defense Ministry is behind me. They're veterans. This is a brigade that bears your name. These have been around here for 2 years near Donetsk, and they are quite firm, and the defense of the enemy is about to break down. It's all in cracks, and each day brings good results. Our victory is close, and even the enemy knows that. But when the war is over, one has to care for all these people that participated in the war. The veterans have huge combat experience. They are a model of real patriotism. They could also educate the youths and prepare and train people to be the succession pool for the army. Probably there is a point in establishing a patriotic structure, a body. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for all that you have been doing. This may be a customary phrase, but actually I tell that with all my heart. And, you know, very many commanders have told me that, you know, we have veterans at a certain area of the front, and for sure that will guarantee full control of the situation. This is a proper assessment of what you can achieve at battlefield with respect to the relevance of such people as you to bring up and educate youths, our school children and youngsters in general. It is very, very relevant to the utmost degree.
And this is absolutely obvious, especially during the turning points in history like we're experiencing these days. It would be quite misplaced to remember the words of Bismarck, but still, he used to serve and live in Russia, even though he became a prominent German figure. He said that wars are not won by generals, they are won by school teachers and priests. And he was right. This is a very precise statement. The upbringing of young people in the spirit of patriotism, in the good sense of the word, is most important. And we're already beginning to do that. Over 1,000 of your colleagues, your brothers in arms, who have served and come back to peaceful life, over 1,000 of them are working in schools, working with children and teenagers. And we will keep doing that. We will keep expanding these activities. It is one thing to read about something in a textbook or watch a movie, and it's absolutely different to meet someone in person, to show an example. The best education is a personal example that you show, and who could do a better job than you? We are live, we can see the people, the reactions. Please, Dmitry Sergeyevich, over to you. I am sorry, Dmitry. I see the poster saying Volga is dying. What is it about? Let's take this question. Hello, Mr. Putin. My name is Elena Usmanova, the business newspaper of Tatarstan Business Online. This year, the people of the Volga region have experienced the catastrophic lowering of the level of the Kuybyshev water reserve. Throughout the summer, the water has been flowing down the Volga from our water reserve. They were saying that they were trying to save the fisheries of Astrakhan. Do you think there is a solution for the Volga water level problem? And don't you think that we may lose this river due to shallowing? I hope this doesn't happen. There is a conflict of interest between the energy industry and other water users downstream the Volga. The energy producers want to keep the levels high to make sure that the volume of electricity production from the Volga cascade and the dams is sufficient to ensure the energy supply for the industry and the economy and the users. However, those using the water downstream, like the fisheries and the shipping industry, want to ensure their transportation lane and want the river to be deeper. We're aware of all these issues related to Volga. The government is working on that, and we will not let it flow idle. Sure, I know there is a problem. We will continue. Yes, our colleague is quite active. Let's keep the parity. We may come back over to Mr. Peskov. Thank you. I see a journalist from Mitrotas in the middle sector, the first row. Please, over to you. The Kremlin pool. Mr. Putin, good afternoon. Ekaterina Kravstovtseva, TASS agency. We have a question on the international agenda. The question is threefold. First, do you see any prospects in normalizing relations with the European Union? Recently, it's been becoming apparent that the West is growing tired of supporting Ukraine. What do you think about that? Another question. The right politicians are getting stronger on the European political scene. How could you comment on that? Are you concerned about that? Thank you. Speaking of normalizing the relations, it's not only up to us. We did not ruin the relations. They did that. They've always been trying to push us back to the backstage and the background, disregarding our interests. The conflict that took place in Ukraine, how did it begin? Let us remember. Let us take 3 or 4 minutes. It all began with a coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. Before that, we've been trying our best. For decades, we've been trying to build normal relations with Ukraine, even following essentially a coup d'etat when Viktor Yanukovych wasn't allowed to come to power when he won the elections. They declared the third tour of the elections, the third round, even though this went against the constitution. This was something like a creeping coup d'etat, but we accepted that. So what happened next? He won the elections, the next one. So what did our so-called opponents do? They committed a coup d'etat. You see, here is the problem. Despite the tragedy of these events, we've always been saying that the Russians and the Ukrainians are one people, essentially, and what we're witnessing now is a great tragedy resembling a civil war between the brothers, when brothers are on opposing sides. And it's not even their fault. The entire southeast of Ukraine has always been pro-Russian. Historically, these were Russian territories. My colleague is raising the poster saying Turkey. He knows that the entire Turkish and the Black Sea region knows that the entire Black Sea shore went to Russia following the Russian-Turkish wars. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. Odessa is a Russian city. Crimea is Russian. Everyone knows that perfectly well. But they started making up historical nonsense, saying that back in the day Vladimir Lenin gave those territories to Ukraine when the Soviet Union was established. We accepted that even after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We accepted that and we were ready to live with that. But the southeast, the pro-Russian part, was always important to us. During the elections, they've always been voting for those who promoted the pro-Russian policies both inside and outside of Ukraine. And this was perfectly fine for Russia. But following the coup d'etat in 2014, it was perfectly clear that they wouldn't allow us to build normal relations with Ukraine. The coup d'etat that the Americans spent $5 billion on, they stated this openly. In 2014, 3 foreign ministers came from Europe. The Polish minister, the German and the French. And so they signed up as guarantors of the agreements between the authorities, President Yanukovych, and the opposition. They said that everything would be resolved peacefully. But 2 days later, they committed a coup d'etat. Why? They could have gone to the elections. But no, they had to create a conflict. Who did that? It was our American so-called friends. The Europeans who had signed up as guarantors of the agreements between the authorities and the opposition pretended to know nothing. Now ask anyone in Europe, can anyone remember that? Of course they don't, but we do, and we will not forget it. In their aspiration to creep up to our borders and take Ukraine into NATO, they have led us into a tragedy. Remember the violent events in Donbass. Throughout 8 years, all of this resulted in the current tragedy. They forced our hand. And so, when I talk about the United States, they organized that, and Europe is only playing into their hands. How can we build a relation with them? We are ready for that, but the Europeans pretend to know and remember nothing. They made only 2 or 3 references to the Minsk agreements they had signed, although they had no intention of complying with them. That was a pretend signature. The guarantees between the authorities and the opposition in Ukraine in 2014 were supposedly signed by them too, and immediately disregarded. Here is what I'm talking about. They have mostly lost their sovereignty. Many of their decisions are harming themselves, but still they do that. Many European public figures on the surface are acting like General de Gaulle, who was fighting for the interests of France. with weapons. He assembled all the French people to show resistance to the occupying forces. However, in practice, they're acting like Marshal Pétain. Even though he was a hero of World War I, in World War II he was a Nazi collaborationist. He accepted the will of the occupying forces. Almost everyone's acting like that. A few people can be an exception. For example, we see some examples like Viktor Orban in Hungary and some other people. They are not pro-Russian politicians. They are pro-national politicians protecting their own national interests. There are no people like that anymore. I am not sure about the explanation. They are too reliant on their big brother, the United States. Still, we're ready to build relations with them. Speaking of the United States, we're ready to talk to them too. We believe that the United States is an important and necessary country for the world. However, their absolutely imperial policy is hurting themselves. It's not even hurting us, it's hurting them first and foremost, because in the public eye they have to act as an empire. And when they're trying to compromise on something, their voters see this as a failure. That's why the elites are forced to act in this way. As soon as something changes domestically, this would establish the fundamental conditions that would allow them to respect others, to respect other countries, to seek compromise rather than use the force and sanctions. Only then will we see the fundamental conditions to establish full-fledged relations with them. So far, we see none. But we are ready. Let me talk a bit more. Not all the military journalists are on the front line. I see someone in that sector over there, Mr. Nikolai Dolgachev. Over to you, sir. Mr. Putin, good afternoon. Nikolai Dolgachev, Vesti, the office in Lugansk. The Lugansk Republic has almost been liberated, but still we're concerned. And we know that the fighting is active in the south and along the Dnieper River. And for some time, they've been talking about the enemy front line on the left bank of the Dnieper, in the Krinky locality. What is that concentration of Ukrainian forces, and how can you comment on that? And let me remind you that in the liberated territories, further away from the front line, we see active work to restore those territories, to restore the infrastructure and the social sites. We see life is changing, but still there are questions and concerns. So let me ask you, what is the future of the new regions of our country? What is the end goal? What will happen in a few years? What will these regions look like as part of Russia? We know that your word is in order, so please tell us, what will happen? I wish it could work like that. Unfortunately, we see something different in the world practice. I believe that everyone present here in this audience and every listener and viewer knows that we speak about something and then something works, something doesn't, and that's okay. Still, we should aspire to reach our goals. Now, speaking about these regions specifically, and speaking about the enemy forces, they have declared their major counteroffensive, but they have failed everywhere. The recent attempt was made, at least as of today, it looked like the last attempt, in fact. They were trying to break through in the left bank of the Dnieper River and move towards Crimea. Everyone was talking about that. Everyone knew that. This is no news. See what happened in that part of the front line. The Ukrainian armed forces have concentrated their artillery strikes in a very narrow part of the left bank to make sure we can save our guys and not to endanger them, not to take too much losses. The military command decided to withdraw a few meters. You're a military journalist, you know what I'm talking about. They withdrew into the forest to save the people, to save them from the unnecessary losses.
Then the Ukrainian forces entered this territory around 1,200 long, and I don't know why they're doing this. They are pushing their people, and these people are going to be killed. And Ukrainian military say that this is the road, one-way road. They're sending their military. Like there were around 80 people at the time. Now there are fewer people. They use only boats, but they are affected by artillery, drones, and other arms. Our military have sanitary losses: 2, 3, 6 wounded people. And the enemy losses tens of people. So they are now staying in this area only because of the political causes, and they are sending the military there only because of the political reasons. So we can only imagine why is this happening. We can only imagine that this is related to the visits to foreign countries to get financing for the country, for the military, for the equipments. This is their approach. They are going to other countries asking for money, and now they have to show that the Ukrainian army has some chances to reach at least something. Without thinking about any losses in the context of the so-called counteroffensive. And people are and the military is getting pushed out of there. They could do something, but they understand that they will be destroyed. That is what is happening. And I would like to point out, these are not just the military of the Ukrainian armed forces. This is elite. These are storm troops. There are not many of them. Let's take like 1 month and a half. We see the losses of the Ukrainian armed forces, and we understand that this is very sensitive for them. I think that this is foolish and irresponsible for the political leadership of the country, but it's their decision. It was said, just try not to push them too early from there. It's very useful for us to send people there. It's very useful for us. This is the logic of the armed fight, and they're continuing to do that. This is a tragedy for them, I think. But, well, the minister said that the territory will be narrowed, and this is happening. And I think that the situation will end. Well, if we're speaking about the situation in the front, you all know it very well. You are experts. And sometimes I look at you and I really afraid, and I see girls on the front line running over there. Well, I should ask to keep women out of there because I'm really afraid to look at that. But what can I say about the situation? Along the line, the front line, our armed forces are improving their situation. They are working actively. I'm speaking about all the front line, and the situation is improving. As for the future of the regions, there are many issues. There are many questions about this from the new regions and from other parts of the Russian Federation. What will happen? How will they develop? Every year, the federal budget has more than 1 trillion rubles for that, for the development of these regions, to introduce them progressively into the social and economic life of the Russian Federation. In other regions, the situation is much better. For instance, like in Crimea, Kiev authorities were not paying a lot of attention to them. But every year we provided 1 trillion rubles, and this is what we'll go into invest in the future. We also have fraternal relations between these regions and other regions of the Russian Federation. Around 150 billion rubles were provided by the regions. Other regions will also provide around 100 billion rubles. But what I would like to say is, this year, these new regions paid to the federal budget 170 billion rubles. What does it say? It means that the economy of these regions is restoring, and now it is in normal state. Yes, a lot has to be done, and we will do it. We are working live, and there are some technical issues. Earlier we saw a video question from Sergei Zenin. Well, I would like to speak to a colleague from Turkey. Let's listen to the question. And then we'll turn to the military correspondent. And there are also girls around the military correspondent. Nadulo Agency. Mr. President, the results of the attacks of the Israel in the Gaza Strip. Every 6-7 minutes, 1 child is dying. 8,000 Palestinian children have died, and 6,000 women. Unfortunately, the UN and the biggest countries of the world cannot stop these attacks. What do you think? Has the UN lost its function? And because of this situation, is Palestine still existing, and is Turkey and Russia doing anything to preserve the peace, to establish the peace in the region? And what Moscow and Ankara are planning in the sphere of regional questions? Are you planning to visit Turkey in the nearest future? Thank you. Well, first of all, I see what is happening in the Gaza Strip. That is just my evaluations. I agree with what has been said. I would like to say that President Erdogan plays a leading role in this, in restoring the situation in Gaza Strip. He is one of the leaders of the international community who pay attention to this tragedy and do everything to change the situation for the better, to create conditions for long-term peace. And this is obvious. And he's very active on this track. And I wish him all the best. Everything that is happening is a catastrophe. There is also a situation related to the Ukrainian crisis. But you and everyone here, everyone in the world, let's see what is happening in the special military operation and in Gaza Strip, and everyone can see the difference. Nothing like that is happening in Ukraine, if we compare it to Gaza Strip. There are thousands of women and children. The Secretary General of the UN said that today Gaza Strip is the biggest cemetery of children in the world. And this evaluation means a lot. This is an objective evaluation. As for the role of the UN, there is nothing unusual in this. I have been speaking about this during Cold War. Different states were blocking some decisions that were promoted by other states. But initially, the UN was created to find consensus, if it is not found, then the decisions cannot be made. Nothing unusual is happening in the life of the UN. It was always like that, especially for taking a Cold War. Mr. Gromyko, foreign minister, he was called Mr. No because Soviet Union was always using his veto right. Well, if if the countries think that some actions are hostile, and then they will not be taken, and this is important to have such mechanisms because then the UN will only be used as a platform to talk. After the First World War, for instance, this happened. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to find consensus. Like Turkey, we think that we should implement the UN decisions about the creation of the Palestine state with the capital in the eastern Jerusalem. We need to create fundamental basis for the Israeli-Palestine settlement. As for the plans, we stay in constant contact with President Erdogan, and we have very similar positions. I think that we'll meet with him. I plan to do that. I was planning to do that. It's not a secret. President Erdogan didn't have time because of his schedule. Well, I'm ready to go to Turkey, and I informed him about that. But, well, he couldn't do this because of his schedule. It was not my fault. Maybe in the beginning of the next year we'll have a visit. As for our efforts, you know that in 2 Arab countries we have consultations in Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates. First of all, we need to preserve people. We need to protect people in Gaza Strip. We are always in contact on that. We need to provide massive humanitarian support to people. When we were in the United Arab Emirates, I was there. We knew that Emirates created in Gaza Strip, not in Gaza Strip, but near it, near the border, they created a hospital there, a field hospital. So maybe it's possible that Russia could open its own field hospital there at the stadium. For that, we need the permission of Egypt and Israel. I have spoken to President of Egypt. He's in favor of that, supports this idea. I have spoken to the Prime Minister Netanyahu. We had consultations on that with special forces, and Israel thinks that Russian hospital will be in danger in Gaza Strip. But it doesn't mean that we will stop these efforts. Maybe today it's dangerous and Israel will not support it. However, we have some agreements with Israel, and they asked us about that. They asked us to provide more medical equipment and medicine. We will do that without any doubt. With all the countries, we stay in contact, and we will continue to work actively with them. Let's speak about girls, women that work on the front line. Now we'll speak to Valentina Solovyova. She's now working in the region of Zaporizhzhia.
Hello. Right now we're at Melitopol cancer ward. This is a regional ward. You can see how many people are stationed in each room, 3 and 6 beds placed here. The head doctor, Konstantin Lakunin. Dr. Lakunin, we see that you have a lot of patients. So what's the situation with doctors? We have a lot of patients, and naturally, just like in the rest of Russia, we don't have enough doctors, but maybe we have a more dramatic situation. We need oncologists, hematologists, peds oncologists. Well, they're simply not present here. So we have, as a cancer ward, to take over the functions, thanks to federal research centers that are helping us with clinical and methodological support. They're taking our patients for treatment. How many patients per doctor as of now? As an outpatient care, 50 or 60 people per day, and 30 as supposed to be as a standard. So the burden of the patient burden is at double. The same applies for inpatient care, 20 people per doctor. That is also twice as high as a standard. Still, you're developing, you have some medicines in common. Yes, we're renovating we're doing a large-scale renovation for surgical ward, and we're doing everything according to federal program standards. This is a surgical table for new surgical rooms. So we believe that we'll start working with great success, with new success. So the matter of staffing is very important, is very acute. You wanted to ask it? Yes, it's a question and also a proposal. Maybe we could create a special federal program to bringing staff to new regions into healthcare and social sphere of the new regions. Possibly this could be residential construction as well as land plans, possibly mortgages with certain benefits and concessions. But we need to attract people here. Is the salary competitive? Yes, it's very competitive, and I think people are coming over for that salary. I cannot say that people are not traveling here, but it seems that these measures are not enough. So that is our question. Thank you. It's very understandable. You know, I was happy to hear the fact that we don't have enough specialists and doctors, just like in the rest of Russia. And that's a quote. So there is a feeling that their region, the region of Zaporozhye, is part of Russia. I wanted to reference that and to highlight that question. This issue is very understandable. The idea to create a special federal program that would help buy apartments and flats at the federal level, I don't know whether it's necessary, but we do need to pay attention to that. We have a special mortgage program for that region at 2%. It's way more than a concession, even better than for families with children. But as I understand the issue, is that these benefits can be applied only to newly erected buildings, and it seems there are not quite a lot of those new buildings. So just like in the Far East, I think we need to expand it to secondary housing. And we need to work really fast and to start doing that work right away. That's number one. And number two, as for creating additional encouragement, well, if the doctor has said that the salary is competitive, then what else is needed? Shumbrad that means hello in Moldovan. Yes, I'll respond to your question. So what needs to be done? Possibly, just like in the Far East, maybe we need to get a higher relocation grant for regional doctors up to 2 million rubles and for paramedics up to 1 million rubles. I think that will be a good stimulus. We have already adopted the federal budget, but maybe we can do that in the nearest future. Thank you. We see that colleagues cannot wait for the end of your response. Well, you said that, yeah, I promised. I think you're from Moldova, right? Yes. Please give the floor to a lady in red. Mr. Putin, my name is Anastasia Miltaeva. I'm from Moldova and represent our multinational republic. I would like to invite you to our pavilion at the exhibition called Russia. Thank you, first and foremost, for this idea. What was the feedback? We took stock, and it seems that 97% of Russians are taking pride in their country after visiting the exhibition. Naturally, the regions have a lot to be proud of. Moldova is doing innovative manufacturing, optic cable, pharmaceuticals, and naturally the calling card of Moldova, black diamond of our region, is a specially treated oak tree. Well, it's a possibility to take a look at the beauty of our region, and well, this is an opportunity to solve matters with the business community and to solve other matters as well. I'd like to invite you there, and I would like to be present there as well. In the run-up to a new year, every girl dreams of a miracle, and even a big girl, so I'll be happy to be there. Yes, thank you very much for your invitation. Indeed, Moldova is a very beautiful republic. What I like is that the way the people treat their traditions, their culture in all of its manifestations, to the traditional dress and traditions in the widest sense of the world. As for the regions and the exhibitions and the regional part of that, indeed, that is a great success. The regional exhibitions at the VDNK are one of the most interesting for visitors and viewers. Yes, indeed, I'll try to get there. Thank you very much. So before we go back to questions from citizens, let's go back to the media questions. I'd like to give the floor to Match TV. Something about sports. Well, if we can judge by the TV channel. Maria Korobova, Match TV channel. Naturally, it's about sports. We have a lot to discuss. IOC, a week ago, has stated very harsh conditions on giving the chance for Russians to take part. However, the same does not apply to the Israelis. Do we need to go to the Olympic Games in this situation? And what is the general situation with sports of high achievements? I would also like to ask the question, due to difficult conditions, difficult times right now, whether we'll continue that tradition of PE and sports development, especially in the regions. Before you can answer, you are into sports yourself, and you call judo your first love. That is truly so. We have a tremendous amount of calls from parents, from trainers, from the children themselves, that they have a lot of willpower to take part in the competitions. However, there is no place to train. Well, not enough facilities for that. Let's listen to the call from Crimea. Mr. Putin, we're talking to you from the sunny state, where we have been to many competitions, to regional competitions. We have always won cups and medals. We have always trained in this facility, but this year it's impossible to hold competitions here. The walls are covered in fungus, so the roof is leaking, so it's impossible to train here. And our trainers have applied everywhere. However, it was impossible to receive a solution. So therefore, we're training outside. Please, if you could renovate our sports facility. We'd like to be healthy and to be a pride of our city and region. Okay, I'd respond to the children, naturally. As for the IOC decision in comparison with other athletes coming from Israel and so on. Well, the first thing is that everything that international civil servants are doing in terms of Russia completely contradicts the ideas and spirit of Pierre de Coubertin, that sports is the world, and that was created in order to unite people and not on the contrary. The current international functionaries are too engaged in the business, in the commercial side of the sports, and now they have fallen into dependence from sponsors that pay attention to the cost of 1 minute of commercials on TV and so on and so forth. There are plenty of internal issues as well. If they continue to act in the same way in the future, they will simply bury the idea of the Olympic movement and the spirit of Olympic movement. You've mentioned Israel and Israeli athletes. Despite what's happening in Gaza, well, if I supported this notion right now, I'll be the same as these sports functionaries. Well, sports should be beyond politics, and it should unite people. Well, as we say that you should not count other people's money, so I think it will be unjustified to lay blame at someone else's feet. Yes, indeed, there are issues as well, as we spoke with your colleague just now. What does it have to do with the athletes? Let them travel and train and compete and so on. The same should be done towards Russian athletes. However, that does not happen. Under the influence from the Western elites, they're making decisions that are beneficial to them and not beneficial to the global sports, just like European politicians are making decisions that are detrimental to themselves and beneficial to the U.S. The same applies here, whether we should go to the Olympic Games or not. Well, you know, we need to really consider what are these conditions, the flag, the national anthem, and so on. I've always been saying that the athletes are training for many years, and we should give them the chance to compete at the major events, including the Olympic Games. Everyone knows that, regardless of the flag, that this is our athlete. It's apparent. That is why I've supported our athletes traveling out and competing. But I think we need to analyze what are the conditions placed by the IOC. If these conditions are politically motivated and aimed at trying to prevent our leading athletes from participating, those who could be at the top with gold, silver, or bronze medals, trying to hamstring our national team. Well, for example, if athletes from the Army Club or from Dynamo cannot compete as they're allegedly connected to the armed forces, though today the CSKA, the Army Club, has nothing to do with the army. Now it's a private club. Well, if the idea is trying to get rid of our leaders and try to show that Russian sports are not developing, on the contrary, is withering, well, that means that the Ministry of Sports and the National Olympic Committee of Russia should analyze and to make a well-balanced decision. Yes, Mr. Peskov, well, you promised a response to our children from Crimea. Naturally, I've noted it down. I would like to address the children and say, indeed, we need to develop sports and all of our programs dedicated to that as well. Indeed, last year, I think 1.5 billion or 1.7 billion was earmarked from the federal budget dedicated to regional sports. This year, we're not even reaching 700 million. We need to get back to that topic, and I think this should be a part of the presidential program. I think it needs to be done. As for the specific matter in Crimea, I will speak to the sports minister and so on, and as for the federal level, we'll give a targeted solution to this matter. Yes, there are a lot of such applications from two-man hockey and other types of sports. So, Mr. Peskov, giving you back the microphone, the National People's Republic will be looking at these applications throughout the year, as we have said. I see Dmitry Kulko, yet another military correspondent. I'm very strange to see him in a suit with a tie, so if you could please give him the mic.
Dmitry Kulkov, First Channel military correspondent. Mr. President, hello, hello. Several questions from the servicemen that are now in the war zone. Do you think that the system of payments to the servicemen is working fine, and can it be improved? I know people that haven't received salaries for months. The second question is about the wounded servicemen and the Foundation Defenders of Fatherland that was established to support the families of the diseased personnel. And how do you assess the operation of that foundation? And a proposal, a suggestion to make, Mr. President, if I'm allowed. Today, servicemen that were wounded after hospitalization have to come back to their squad deployment zone. So they have to come back to the military zone, and they may have been wounded gravely, losing limbs, and probably it would be better for them to go through this commission, medical commission, in hospitals where they are treated. And the last question is about drones, aerial vehicles. We have a shortage of them, an acute shortage, and the combatants ask to provide more of that, but it's insufficient still. Their numbers are insufficient. And not long ago, we collected money together with People's National Front for the 4th Brigade that is fighting around Klishayevka. A month has passed, and these drones are consumables, and half of them is gone despite the jamming and the rain. We need more of that, and our servicemen need more drones, because we need to improve the situation, to provide reconnaissance and surveillance. You probably are observing that things are improving. Tell me I'm right. It has been improving, yes, but we need more. Well, it's been improving, which is for sure, but you are correct in saying that we do not have the sufficient quantities always, and it's hit and miss. Please sit down. And the front line is around 2,000 kilometers long. Around 2,000 kilometers long. And definitely, obviously, for sure, not all the supplies arrive on time everywhere, but we are ramping up our own domestic manufacturing, and we have been importing lots of things privately from the abroad by the Defense Ministry. Well, and the Defense Ministry, the industry have been working hard to improve the situation with respect to counter electronic fight systems and anti-jamming systems. We have been installing a new system called Lisochek on all the vehicles. We'll keep bolstering these efforts, and as regards the bottom-up movement and the People's Front participation engagement, this is a very good thing, and the government and the state could do without this support. But we cannot stop that. We don't have a right to stop that, and I'd like to thank all our people for their heartfelt attitude and caring attitude, taking into account the needs of the people and the servicemen fighting there. Around 10 billion rubles of donations. Definitely now our economy is on the rise and we have the funds, but the fact that they knit garments and they send money and send letters, around 3 million letters from children were delivered to the front line, and we will be supporting that. I'd like to express my gratitude to all the volunteers engaged. Sometimes we have some disruptions in supplies. We have regular meetings with the military correspondents, and you have been keeping a close eye at what is happening there, and I hope we will keep in touch with you, and you will submit all the data to me and the Defense Ministry. With respect to the need for the wounded servicemen to come back to the stationing site to perform all formalities, I saw these questions in the letters, and probably the situation has changed. Either you have the obsolete data, or I have imprecise data. As the Defense Ministry has said, now everything is possible. All the formalities may be performed in hospitals or rehabilitation facilities that are not on the front line. Definitely, I will double-check whether the efforts of providing accommodation and benefits are well established, or whether they have to come back to their stationing site or not. I'll talk to the Defense Minister after the press conf. It must be rectified if it's flawed. With respect to the Fatherland Defendants Foundation, it works very well. Very good people. It's a brilliant team, and I met one of their leaders, and wonderful people, a great team, very upbeat, but their scope is limited, you know, as per their statutory documents. They cannot take direct participation or be directly engaged. And I always was against them channeling and managing funds, but I am in favor at the same time to enhance their rights with respect to the control of what amount is channeled where and what the outcomes may be, inter alia also in the sphere of rehabilitation. And I will not delve into details now, but I know that the members of Parliament, after visiting one of the outlets of this foundation, reported to me, and we will improve the operation of that foundation so that it is a good tool to uphold the interests of all the servicemen participating in the hostilities. You mentioned the huge and crucial role of the volunteers and the kind heart of them. Lots of questions received from them. Madam Marina from the Moscow region asks as follows today. We see a lot of help from the grassroots to the military in procurement and supplies. Why do rank and file people do that, not the government? You know, I have just answered. The government has been tackling that. 99.99% of all the efforts is the share of the government, but still the bottom-up movement is heartfelt and will not limit that. Well, the counter-jamming systems, well, an assault fighter asks to provide more jamming devices, and you know, we may be lacking them in these systems in some parts of the front line, in some segments of the front line, because it's more than 2,000 kilometers long and 617,000 strong contingent is stationed there. So we might have disruptions in certain segments, definitely, but if you have specific cases, please provide the data, and myself and the military correspondents will watch that. Sergei Sobolev from Novosibirsk once again phoning in. Mr. President, Sergei Sobolev, on the 13th of November 2022, I concluded a contract with a private military group for 6 months. When I returned home, I came to the Defense Committee to receive the certificate of a veteran, and I turned to the foundation of Fatherland's defenders to receive the certificate, and I was declined, and in other instances I also was declined, And please, will you sort that out? Because we all, myself and my comrades, served in this private military company, and we cannot receive the veteran certificates. You know, I know about this system. These are the loopholes, the gaps that should have been rectified by the Defense Ministry. Well, formally and legally, we do not have private military companies as per our law. This is number one. Number two, the contracts of the hostilities participants were not signed with the state, but with the private companies. So commanders of those private military companies were related, were in contact with the government, and the payments were in cash. This is also a problem, and now it is very hard to pin down the exact lists of those private military groups. But I know all these people. I personally have some instances, like some of the children of my acquaintances participated in the warfare from representing these private military companies. And among my milieu, there are people whose children have participated, and some of them lost their lives, sacrificing that for the motherland, being members of the private military groups, and without a doubt, their rights must be reinstated. They are eligible to receive all the social benefits and allowances and all other forms of support granted to other participants of the hostilities. This is my categoric stance. I will not go into detail, but this must be done, and the Defense Ministry knows that, as well as the government. If need be, or probably necessarily, we would have to amend the legislation, and this will be done, and I promise we will do our best. We'll go to great lengths. Now let's call. I can see some running line. One of them has been saying, Yelpatyevo, Yaroslav region, please provide gas supplies. We'll have a look at that. Probably we'll come back to that later, and we may speak about the gasification and Yelpatyevo settlement in Yaroslav region. And now we'll have a video call out to the village of Beriozovo. Can you hear us? Good afternoon. I'm a service person now situated in Lugansk. Junior Sergeant Yulia Berezova. I always wanted to end up in Donbass as a volunteer. On the 10th of May of 2022, I subscribed the Voluntary Mobilization Act, and I was ascribed to a regiment for the sake of defending our homeland and for the sake of justice. But I was mobilized in the Donetsk People's Republics, not Russia. But, you know, I wanted to have all the benefits on site of my domicile, and I have a certificate of a participant of hostilities in Donetsk Republic, and it's valid only in that republic. And in the federal database, my serial number, my personal number, is inexistent. So we are not represented. We are invisible for the nationwide system. Thank you for your question. You were recruited by the people's militia of Donetsk People's Republic that are on the front line, on the contact line, participating in the hostilities. And indeed, the point is, the issue is that those who signed contracts when Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics were not part of the Russian Federation are now in trouble. And the issue is quite relevant. Well, the junior sergeant is a Russian national, I know, and it's especially relevant for those who were not citizens of Russia. Now, the papers that you have make you eligible for benefits in Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. These papers may be rendered valid on Russian soil. There is a procedure for that. Or you may receive a brand new package of documents on behalf of the Russian Federation. Now, a commission has been established in Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. They already operate.
And I believe that there have been about 4,500 people who have confirmed their rights. In the Lugansk People's Republic, there was 17.5 thousand people who also confirmed their rights. And in Donetsk, they have already issued the relevant certificates and IDs. A few thousand of them, in fact. And the same goes for the Lugansk People's Republic. 1,700 IDs have been issued. So we have already started moving along this path, and we will keep working to restore the rights and confirm the rights of the war veterans. There should be no doubt about that. If something's not done yet, rest assured we will do that, and we will finish it. And if there are any difficulties that you're experiencing when addressing the Commission, you can just tell us, and we will fix it. Let's get back to the journalists, if I may. There's a young man next. Wait, let's move to the north. There's a question there. Mr. President, good afternoon. Republic Komi, Darishchanina, the capital Panorama, and member of the civil chamber of our region. This is a question that the people of the Northern Territories entitled me to ask. You know that, unfortunately, all over the country, not only in our region, it takes quite a long time to implement a very important part of the program of the relocation of the people of the far north. We have 6 localities like that in the Republic of Komi. These are the people who have given their lives for the economic development of the north, and now they wish they could spend their retirement in territories with a more moderate climate. A few figures. This year, our republic received 129 housing certificates from the state, but there are 21,000 people still in line for the certificates. I'm not asking you to give certificates to all the people, but I see 2 options here. The first option is prioritize 2 categories of people, the disabled people and the retired people. These are the 2 categories who should be the priority. There are 2 options for them. Even though the federal budget is quite pressed for money, but still I would ask you to seek additional finance for next year. If that's too complicated, our region is ready to get a low-interest loan, and our authorities are ready to relocate the people of Irtim and Vorkuta, the people who live in these regions, to relocate them within the region, for example, to Syktyvkar or to the south of Komi, where the climate is also quite acceptable. Would it be possible to choose one of the 2 options, or perhaps there are any third options? And thank you once again for solving our question of giving the Vorkuta airport to the federal property status. Thank you for that. Yes, and it's important that the airport is developing. Sometimes we give it to the region, and then the region starts asking for federal money for development. Well, the Republican authorities are very active, and the governor was asking you about that, and all the decisions have been taken. Yes, I know that the governor is very active and he has good connections. He used to work in the federal authorities, and I believe he is quite efficient in that. I would ask you to repeat your proposal. So, you're suggesting that we prioritize two categories of people, the disabled people and the retired people. And so we see two options for them. The first, the easiest option, is seeking additional financing from the federal budget. The second option that we would be capable of is relocating these people within our region of Komi, but that would need a low-interest loan from the federal budget to make sure we can solve their housing issues, either in Syktyvkar or in the south of Komi. The republic is big, and moving from the north to the south of the republic would also be a solution. You know, if we had a finance minister here, he would answer that we have no money, and the Minister of Finance never has any money for that. But still, we should seek a solution and seek the expansion of the program. I know that there are people who've been working their entire life in the north, or at least some period of their life, and now they would like to move somewhere south or to a region with a more moderate climate. Of course, we will continue this program, most importantly. And secondly, speaking of expanding the spending and the budget, well, the budget for next year has already been adopted. If we have any additional income, we will consider this. Speaking of the relocation within the region, I think that's quite possible. We will talk about this with the head of the republic and with the government. Giving out a loan is also not quite simple, but this might be a form of providing assistance to the region. This wouldn't be so pressing for the finance ministry, although it has certain difficulties for sure. But we will try to do that. And speaking of special priorities for the two categories, that's right. We will discuss that with the government. Thank you for your suggestion. Let us move on to that sector. The third row, a young man sitting over there raising his hand. Please introduce yourself. Vladimir Putin, RBC channel. A couple of questions about the currency. Recently, Javier Milei became the new president of Argentina, and one of his main proposals before the elections is to use the US dollar instead of the Argentinian peso. Russia, on the other hand, has recently been pursuing the policy of de-dollarization, not to use dollars and euros in international transactions. What do you think about the process, and how convenient is it for Russia to ensure transactions in rubles and the national currencies of the friendly states? And speaking of the Russian ruble, in your view, what are the factors mostly affecting the exchange rate of the ruble, its growth and increase and decrease? What is it reliant upon? Let us begin with Argentina, not to get back later to that. Yes, we are all aware of the idea of the president-elect of Argentina to use the US dollars within the country. This is a sovereign decision of each state. First of all, the inflation in Argentina is about 143%, and there are numerous problems. And even the previous authorities were talking about that they have issues with paying back the loans that had been issued to Argentina from various sources. So the logic here is clear. However, this would mean a significant loss of the national sovereignty. If the current Argentinian authorities see no other solution in this financial conundrum, the decision is up to them. However, this would mean a significant loss of their sovereignty. Now, the next point. There is also a social and economic component of such decisions. You're from the RBC channel. You specialize in these kinds of stuff. You're all specialists and experts. You'll know what I'm talking about, and the citizens will understand. There's nothing complicated in what I'm about to say. Even the use of the US dollar when calculating your national currency exchange rate may result in serious social and economic consequences. Back in the day, Argentina went through great turmoil relating to their finances and the banking issues. Now look what's going to happen if they only use the dollar, or if they directly link their national currency to the US dollar. They're trying to solve their domestic economic problems. And all governments are always taking into account their social obligations to the citizens. And by the way, I am satisfied to know that the Russian government is dealing with its obligation. Despite the rising expenses for the defense and security, we are fully compliant with all our obligations to the citizens, 100%. Some might say we're not doing enough and more should be done. We were talking to the Republic of Komi about the problems with relocation and so on. But the fact that the state is giving its promises and we stay true to our promises. Now, speaking of the US dollar, they have certain obligations. The retirement benefits, the state employee salaries, and so on and so forth. Generally, there's not enough money. So what would it mean if they started using the dollars? They have their national currency, the peso, and a tool to affect the inflation. That doesn't work perfectly, but still they have the means to balance the healthy economy and their social obligations. Now, if they switch to a foreign currency, they can't print their own money. There's only one way to deal with the inflation: to cut the social expenditure, to cut it everywhere, to cut the salaries, to cut the retirement benefits, the medical expenses, the road infrastructure, the security, and so on. There is no other way if they renounce their national currency. And any government taking such decisions would find itself in a very complicated situation from the point of view of domestic political stability. If they're ready for that, that's their sovereign right. The country is independent and they may take their own decisions. Speaking of us, you see, we're rejecting that. We're not. However, we've been experiencing problems with the transactions in foreign currencies. And by the way, they're shooting themselves in the leg by doing that. They are blocking our access to the US dollars and the euro as universal reserve global currencies. First of all, the US dollars. In 2021, if memory serves me right, we were servicing our experts and we were using 87% of foreign currencies in these transactions. So the US dollars and the euros. The ruble only accounted for 11 or 13%. And the Chinese yuan accounted for 0.4%. As of September this year, the figures are as follows. The rubles accounts for 40%. The yuan accounts for 33%. The overall use of the US dollar and the euro is 24%. It went down from 87 to 24. Why did they do this? They shot themselves in the leg. Is it bad for us? No, it's not. The more we use the national currencies in our economic transactions, the better for us. This increases our sovereignty and our opportunities. So, what defines the exchange rate? The exchange rate depends on the market conditions, on the price on our export goods, and it relies on the domestic consumption and domestic demand, which is growing. There is also one more aspect. By the way, There was a decree that was meant to regulate the exchange rate situation, and it also played its own role and made the contribution. What was this about? In the previous years, it didn't take any restrictions. We used to have enough information from the countries that were receiving the majority of our exports, and it was clear for us where the capital is moving.
Now we do not receive any information. They closed everything for us. The government and the central bank do not see what is happening with the finances that our those who export receive from exporting. The central bank and the government now have a legitimate desire to see how everything is accumulated, where money is moving. So these elements of control are being introduced. I think that everything is becoming normal, and if everything is temporary. Well, but the financial situation is stable, and the main thing is to ensure this stability and predictability. In my opinion, we are reaching this goal today. Let's have a question from the hall. We haven't asked anyone from that sector. Can we ask someone from Kuban? Can I please participate also in this? Hello, Mr. President, Zhmutsky Maxine from Krasnodar territory. This year, the resorts of Kuban reached a historical record. 17.5 million tourists arrived to our region. It's only in summer, and now there is an active winter period. This is a burden for the infrastructure, first of all, to the transport because of the closed airports. Is there a federal plan to develop transport access to this region, maybe railways, highways? Just yesterday, there was information that on the 15th of December, tomorrow, there will be a test flight to the airport of Krasnodar. If everything is good, our Krasnodar airport will be opened. Is it true? Thank you. Please sit down. As for the airports, the main criteria is security. Ensuring security of people. This is an absolute priority if we're speaking about opening airports. This also goes for the airport in Krasnodar. It's far away from the war zone. The Ministry of Defense has this request. They're analyzing the situation to make a decision. If they're moving to this decision, they will inform me about that, and we will act. But first, we have to see the situation and analyze it. As for the development of transport ways, development of aerial transport, railways, highways, everything is being developed. There is a high-speed highway that we are planning to construct. The first stage, Moscow, St. Petersburg, then we'll move to the south. Possibly, and we're thinking about this, the main thing we have to do right now is to create an effective structure that will deal with it, that would create a good business model for development. Everything is possible. The government and the initiators of this process are working on that, thinking about that. They are providing proposals. I'm speaking about Sberbank. The government is also included in this work. If there is a highway between St. Petersburg and Moscow, it will take a little bit more than 2 hours to get to the city, and in Moscow people need more time to go from one part to the other. And as for the south, Krasnodar, Kuban, Stavropol territory and other regions, Crimea, this is also important. That is why we are working we are starting to work on this track, and I hope it will be effective in the future. As for the development of transport for the passengers, it is rising. If we're speaking about passenger transport, aerial transport for passengers, it's more than 16%. Then go railway transport, 10% more. And as for cars, buses, there is a rise of 6.4%, 6.5%. So the volume of passenger transport is increasing dramatically. All those who participate in this process have to think about the coming tourist season, to do everything to ensure the interest of the people to develop the internal tourism. It is developing already at a good pace, and I would like to thank everyone who works in this sphere, those who work in Kuban. Thank you for increasing the quality of their work, and I hope it will continue. Let's have one more question. Please, there is a person in the first row, live. The first row, yes. Alexander Yunashel, live. There are a lot of military correspondents here, and it is demanded a lot from them. But there are some articles of the criminal code. For killing, there is 12 years, and sometimes 14 years are given to extortion on the internet. For instance, let's take a history of journalists. There is a case with the bank with the banker Ushakov. So what are you saying? You are trying to justify this journalist? No, I'm not trying to justify anyone. I'm just giving the facts. Let's speak about her actions. Maybe we should change some articles of the criminal code. Maybe we should change the limits of the limits. When is this limit? When the criminals are really punished, and when we are starting witch hunt? Well, I do not know all the details of the situation. What has she done? What the journalist Bayazitova, what has she done? Maybe she was working for the opposition. Or what has she done to hunt for her? No one is hunting her. Lawyers know that law is dura est lex, and the law is dire one. And I know that there are different crimes and sometimes 12, 14 years are given to the people. I know about this, but I was really shocked. It's too much, and it is obvious. In many countries, economic crimes, tax crimes, anti-monopoly crimes, fighting cartels. These imprisonment terms are being summed up, and people receive up to 100 years. Why is this happening? Because the society and the legislators think that at some stage of the development of the society, of the economy, the social threat of these actions is so big that legislators think that the adequate reaction is needed to stop such illegal actions. Let's take this case and other cases. I am a citizen, and I also have questions. Why would we put someone? What would we imprison someone for 14 years? There was an ex-minister, and he received like 19 years of imprisonment for some violations. What was done by him and by this woman is bad, but giving them 14, 19 years of imprisonment is too much. So legislators have to think about that. It is necessary to think about this. But there is still this law, and we need to implement it. We know there is a film that we love very much. The station, Belarusian station, where Papanov represents an enterprise, and he is always in a confrontation with a young director. He asks him to violate some kind of instruction. And the hero of Papanov says, "You're so young and energetic. Maybe you are right. Then go and make everything to cancel this instruction. And still, if there is this instruction, I'll do everything to implement it." The stability of the legal system is important, and the society understands how it works and how the society evaluates what was done. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't change anything. I agree with you. I'll ask the legislators, the State Duma, to make another evaluation and to react. I agree with you. Mr. President, we're working live. We have been working for 2 years. Let's just listen to other questions. They are not usual ones. For instance, Yaroslav from St. Petersburg. Today, our country and you personally are being insulted. For instance, maybe in the future, a person from a German village will say, well, Putin was doing everything correctly. What do you think about all the world that is against you? And have you ever played chess with someone recently? And what can you say about the celebrations? There are many questions. Well, the first one was about a person from Germany. Another one was about stress, about motivation, how you preserve it. And another question was about playing chess. Have you played chess with someone recently? And what do you recommend the Russians to do during long celebrations? Why only speaking about a German town? I know that not only in German towns, but in many other towns in Europe and the US and other regions of the world, many people think that everything we're doing is correct. We're not afraid to fight for our national interests. And we're not interfering into other interests. This is the first thing. We have a lot of supporters all over the world that support and protect our traditional values. There is a great number of them, and there are more and more of them. The number is rising exponentially. As for the stress, how to deal with it, how to deal with the situation when we are attacked, the sense of duty. I'm saying it without any pathos. During years, I have accustomed to the fact that we need to strive to choose the main thing and do everything to reach our objectives without paying attention to anything else. Of course, we need to have a wide vision to analyze everything, but we should be confidently moving towards our objective. I'm confident of what I'm doing. As for the chess, well, I have recently asked a young boy, well, let's play chess. And he said, okay, let's do it. And I asked him, what do you think, I will win? And he looked at me, possibly not. Well, not possibly. So we should always work and to improve. I'm trying to do that. What about the new year? I think we should pay attention to our family, do something together, find some common cause, go to theaters, exhibitions, do sports, be active. And it's good to spend this celebration with the family. We receive a reaction to the questions that we receive. There is a call, Crimeans that go to the governor's school, and they are ready to go to the gym and to repair it in Crimea.
I think the same response is expected to this matter. This is not a new topic. However, there are new manifestations. The issues with higher prices for a certain product. It is very sad to buy eggs in our country. Coming from Tomsk, Anastasia from Ivano is asking whether these are special golden eggs from a golden goose. And there is also a question from Krasnodarsky region. Dear President, my favorite president, my name is Irina Okopova. I'd like to appeal to you. I'd like to ask you to use your influence. Right now, a dozen of eggs is costing from 180 up to 220 rubles. Where are these prices coming from? Chicken breast used to be 165 rubles per kilogram. Right now, it's 350. Chicken wings, 165, today 250. Please take mercy on retired people. We don't have millions received in pensions. Please do something about it. It's too bad that you're doing this only once a year. We need to have a 3 times a year hotline calling so that people can appeal to you. Thank you so much, and I hope that you'll help me. Dear Irina, you mentioned that we're doing this only once a year. However, believe me, I've just spoken quite recently to the agricultural minister asking about egg prices. They're saying that everything's fine with these eggs. And he spoke very honestly. And I said that citizens have issues with that egg prices, 40% price hike, as well as chicken meat. Well, what happened is that we have a certain increase, it's not that much, but increase in salaries. So there is higher demand. So that used to be a rather cheap source of protein. It's very popular. I'm very happy to eat a sunny side up. I could eat a dozen of them at breakfast. Well, what happened is that there is greater demand. However, the production did not. Second, import was not allowed in the necessary scale. Now we have proposals coming in from Turkey. We have good relations, especially economic relations and in agricultural sphere with other countries. Belarus is offering. However, it wasn't opened in time. We need to do that within Eurasian Economic Union, and I think the decision was recently made, and well, it must be done in December. And the situation, without a doubt, will improve. I truly hope that it will happen so, because at least 2 weeks ago we had this conversation with the Minister of Agriculture. I'm very sorry. Please accept my apologies for that. This is a shortcoming in the work of the government. Some people say that it's not so, but I do believe that it is so, that we did not allow for a greater scale of import, hoping that they can earn more money, I guess. I promise that the situation will come back. Utilities prices are also concerning our citizens. Some people are saying that the light at the end of the tunnel is now higher in price right now. Some people are saying that the utilities are growing higher than the pensions, greater than 7%. Okay, would like to... Mr. President, in 2024, we retired people are going to have an increase of pensions by 7.5%. At the same time, since June 2024, Novosibirsk is going to increase the utilities prices from 9 up to 14%. That means those 7.5% will be annihilated as for our increase in pensions. I'd like to give you the document proving that, coming from our governor. With respect, yes. Well, our counterpart did not present him, Vladimir Leontiev. Mr. Leontiev, I agree with that. I'll look at the situation. I can see it on screen. Indeed, the utility prices, there is something happening in Novosibirsk. We'll analyze the situation. Indeed, the pensions are going to be adjusted for inflation by 7.5%, but I hope that it will be higher than the inflation rate. But what I wanted to point out is that we have adjusted quite recently, I think in December 2022, we have adjusted the pensions by 10%, 10-something percent. Then in spring, there was yet another adjustment of 4.5% adjustment for inflation. And since the beginning of this year, we're going to have yet another increase by 7.5%. However, the utility prices were not increased since June last year, and the increase is planned only in July 2024. That means that the utility prices have been the same for 1.5 years, and there were 5 adjustments of pensions. And overall, that means more than 23% of pension adjustment. It seems so, yes. Naturally, everything should be done timely. The prices, utility prices, should be increased step by step, and there should be advanced adjustment for inflation of the income of the citizens. There is yet another thing that should be noted here. There is a rule, according to the law, that if the utility expenses of a family, of a household, exceed 22%, then the household has the right to receive a subsidy. And hundreds of thousands of people have used this rule last year in 2022. I think this year the same applies. In some regions, there is even a lower threshold, not 22%, but if the household is spending up to 15% of their income on utilities, 15 or 20%, they can receive the subsidy. But we need to take a look at the parameters, what's happening in Novosibirsk. Of course, I'll do that. Is that correct that for a very simple service, utilities, you need to pay a commission to the bank? There are a lot of questions like that. Well, I don't think that's right, especially if it applies to retired people. The decision has just been made. The commission should not be taxed coming from the retired people. That's something new. I think we've forgotten about our audience here. Let's give the floor to the Baikal-Amur main line. They will help you to hold the mic. Blagoveshensky, our gate to China, Irina Voroshilova from Amurskaya Pravda newspaper. Mr. President, our question is the following. Next year, we'll celebrate since 50-year anniversary of the construction site of the century, Baikal-Amur mainline. That used to be its name. Now, this mainline is divided between 2 railways. Do you think that it's time to bring back this BAM railroad? Now we have BAM 2, BAM 3 railroads. They're very important for us. What do you mean to bring it back on the map? What do you mean by that? There is no BAM right now. There used to be, indeed, a BAM railroad, Baikal-Amur main line. That used to be the name. And now this main line is divided between East Siberian Railway and part of Far Eastern Railway. So, per se, there is no BAM on the map. And now there is an organization with hundreds of thousands of people from the post-Soviet space that suggesting to create a Baikal-Amur main line from Tashkent station to Soviet Haven, and that would allow to speed up implementation of BAM 2 and BAM 3 projects and give beginning to building of new railroads in the east of the country. You know, I don't think I've ever paid attention to the fact that for the first time I'm hearing that there is such an issue that BAM mainline is divided between different railroads, because still it all belongs to the Russian Railways company. The head of the company never mentioned that there is such an issue. Still, I'll have a conversation with him as well as Minister of Transport Savelyev and with other people as well. If they think that it needs to be brought under one roof, I don't mind. I understand that making it one main line from Tashkent station to Sovgavin station, well, I understand the idea, but it should be initiated by the Ministry of Transportation or the Russian Railways company. No one ever posed this question. Well, it's okay. I'll have a conversation with the relevant authorities, with Russian railroads and with the Ministry of Transportation. I was never against it. If it's necessary, well, why not do it? For the first time, I'm hearing that. Would it help new construction projects? I don't think I really understand how it can help that. They're always having trouble trying to figure out who will be building what and on what conditions. Well, that Deputy Prime Minister Kusnulin is responsible for that. In general, I'm aware of what is happening. I hope that the work is being done. It's hard to do. The conditions are quite tough, but all the goals will be achieved. I promise you that I'll take a look at that issue, but it's the first time that I'm hearing that there is such an issue, especially if it's coming from those who were responsible for it, from the BAM community. Yes, the 50-year anniversary should be celebrated properly. Thank you very much. Let's respect other people. Take a look at how many questions need to be asked. Can we go back to BRICS Tatarstan? What kind of questions do you have? Artur Karlilov, Tatar Inform Media. As we know, BRICS will take place in Kazan, in our city. The first question is, what kind of impact will the BRICS will have on the rules-based world order? First and foremost, Western rules, as we understand. The second thing, the choice of Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan. Does it have to do with the fact that now Kazan is becoming a certain diplomatic hub in relations with Eastern countries and the Muslim countries? Well, that's not the case. It has to do with the fact that Tatarstan is developing very well, and Kazan is one of the best examples of such development. The conditions, good conditions, have been created by the previous president and the current president. There, Mr. Minikhanov is working very well. I remember when I traveled with Mr. Shaimiev, we were looking at houses, and you know what made me happy back then? They couldn't even be called houses, but they were more like earth huts. Well, but when we came in, it was very clean. I still have that feeling of respect for the people who were living very modestly, but they were very clean and very organized. That's the level of the culture of people. It amazes me, well, and it's reason for my respect. And I think it has to do with the successful development of Tatarstan and the capital of Tatarstan, the city of Kazan.
Undergoing steady development and being in a good shape with well-developed infrastructure. Kazan hosted a number of major international sports and political events, and naturally it becomes a gravity center or a hub for multilateral meetings. And Tatarstan is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious republic with a well-established balance between the creeds. It is a good model for the rest of the country, so this is why we opted for this city. And with respect to the rules-based world order, these rules are inexistent because they change on a daily basis depending on political expediencies and immediate interests of some of the stakeholders. How shall that impact the situation? Well, things will develop in the necessary, in the right direction. It will demonstrate that there are very many forces in the world, very many powerful nations that want to live guarded not by the unwritten rules, but rather, on the contrary, by the rules of the United Nations Charter and other statutory tenets, and being guided by the interests thereof and of their partners, without establishing military alliances, create the context for effective, mutually advantageous development. This will be at the heart of Russia's presidency in BRICS. What airplanes, what aircraft shall we use to fly to that summit? Because a heavy blow was dealt to the aviation and aircraft construction. In past years, you obliged Russian airlines to buy and purchase Russian aircraft, and now they are queuing to buy these. But still, we are now using foreign-made aircraft. Is it safe? Because any news about an air incident or accident cause outrage. And now a phone in from Maxim Saltykov from Moscow. Can you hear us loud and clear? Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Maxim. I'm a cadet of the Aviation School, military school. What is to happen with our civil aviation in the current geopolitical context amid sanctions, and our airlines are not allowed to purchase foreign-made aircraft? MS-21 and IL-96 are 300 only being certified, and it will take a lot of years for them to be commissioned, and the lifetime of the currently operating aircraft is coming to an end. And another question, very few graduates come to work to our airlines, although we're trained for that. And in a nutshell, shall we fly in future, and what shall we use? What aircraft shall we use? We will definitely keep flying. With respect to foreign-made aircraft, Pavel has been correct in saying that we used to have disputes with our airlines that procured without any reasonable limitation too many of foreign-made airplanes. They had their own rationale because they cited the noise levels and the fuel consumption levels. Lots of arguments behind that, but probably it would have been better that proper market for Russian-made aircraft had been established. We have had some achievements, but our fleet is overloaded with foreign makes, and I think our companies acted correctly. They did not respond to the unlawful action on the part of the leasing companies and operators, but no one wants to lose money in part of these aircraft. We repurchase, we buy them back, and they become the property of Russian airlines. We also need to enhance our own capability in aircraft building. And I hope that all the plans of ours, and we have around 1,000 aircraft in the pipeline until 2030, MS-21, and re-equipping the current aerial vehicles with Russian-made engines, PD, and we should start manufacturing PD-35 engine with more powerful thrust, and we will have the opportunity to increase the number of long-range aircraft, including Il-96-400, which already is in operation, the cargo version of it. It's a bit longer, so we must work hard, and we have the potential to implement all our plans. I hope that we will deliver on all of the plans of ours, and we will have aircraft at hand for the pilots and passengers. And with respect to small scale or regional aviation, we also must develop that capability. A question from the room, from the hall. I saw New York Times. Please, will no, Lin Xinhua first, and then New York Times. Good afternoon, Mr. President. It's my pleasure to ask you a question. Xinhua Chinese news agency. 2 questions to you. The first one, as we know, Russia is to preside in BRICS next year. What meaning, what importance does cooperation and coordination between BRICS and Russia and China in BRICS have? And what do you expect from the development of the Chinese-Russian ties next year? Well, we know. Please have a seat. We know, and I have to repeat, that our level of interaction with the PRC is unparalleledly high, and we hope to reach $200 billion of mutual trade next year. It's going to be on top $200 billion, even probably shortly this year, early next year. And in the first quarter, we will attain the $220 billion of bilateral trade. And the increase will be 31%. It was 31% last year, and the growth will be 30% this year. We have been pursuing our economic ties in various sectors steadily. We have been diversifying our ties. We have been developing infrastructure and bridge building and high-tech cooperation also, and we will act in this vein. And an incentive, an impetus was provided during the March visit paid by the President of China, Xi Jinping. And we agreed that we would develop relations in 8 main areas, and we signed the relevant documents. And the government of Russia and that of PRC started implementing our plans that we designed with my friend and a friend of our country, President Xi, actively. We have been working intensively, stably, reliably. As regards BRICS, well, I will not say anything new. This vector has been reinforced, and the Russian-Chinese ties are one of the main guarantors behind the global stability. We see what has been happening around Russia and China, and we see some attempts of the West to switch NATO eastwise, and that definitely is beyond their statutory scope. North Atlantic is called North Atlantic. Why do they want to come to Asia? Still they do. They're trying to instigate, incite the situation. They're establishing new political alliances and military alliances and with different makeups. Us in China don't do anything of the kind. We do cooperate in military sphere, in the economic and humanitarian sectors also, but we do not establish any alliances, and our friendship is not meant against third countries. It's to benefit us, most importantly, not anyone, not being against anyone else. What we see from the West, well, they're trying to make friends against someone, and we have been watching that closely, and we will respond on time and effectively. There should be no doubts about that. And now, New York Times, as we promised, well, in the middle.
Газета New York Times.
New York Times. Gally Hopkins, for more than a year, Western correspondents and journalists could not attend such events, and I'm so glad that we can participate. It's all Peskov's fault. But let me please, I'm a democratic person. I'm a democratic man. Well, we'll be talking that, we'll be discussing that. Can I ask a question in English, please?
My colleague, Wall Street Journal correspondent Evan Gershkovich, has been held in Lefortovo prison without a trial for 37 weeks. His detention was today again, the extension on his detention was today again upheld. Paul Whelan, another U.S. citizen, has been in prison for nearly 5 years. A spokesman for the U.S. State Department, which considers both men wrongfully detained, recently said that Moscow had rejected what it called a substantial offer to return both of them to the United States. Is that true? What will it take to bring them home? And do you think that finding an agreement with the United States to bring them home to their families can be a way to improve the severely strained relations between the United States and the Russian Federation? Thank you.
Well, you have mentioned that your colleague from an Austrian agency, and Austrian was an Austrian journal. Well, he is detained without trial. He has been in detention without trial, and you said that his detention was extended. That was done upon a ruling by the court, so it would be inappropriate to say that it was done without any trial or court intervention. So there is some court ruling behind that. With respect to possible returning home or extradition of these two men back home, why not bring them back home? Why have they committed offences on Russian soil? They ought not to have done that. Well, it's not that we decline to send them home. No, we want to come to terms, and these agreements must be mutually acceptable and should be okay for both of the parties. And we have contacts with our American partners on that. We're in touch with them, and we pursue dialogue. It is not at all easy. I will not delve into detail, but I think that we speak the language that both sides understand, mutually understandable language. I hope we'll find a mutually acceptable solution, but the American side should also listen to us and make a decision that would be satisfactory for the Russian side also. Well, humanitarian grounds must underpin these agreements and decisions, definitely. I agree with you. Mr. President, now we are in the winter, and switching and swapping from a topic to another, and everybody is ailing, and our Russian medical agency has been registering an upswing in COVID and measles. Measles has become 300 times more active, the incidence of it, and probably there is a shortage of vaccines. And a letter from the Samara region that they don't have vaccines against measles and other diseases for more than 4 months. And a lot of our nationals need Western medicines that are not available here, and there are sometimes no analogues, no substitutes. And how can we adapt, and whether we receive, whether we are successful in that or not?
Thank you. Speaking of the vaccines for measles, parotitis, and rubella, I think that this is quite a technical problem that we've been experiencing, and this is quite regrettable. Here's the reason. The reason is related to eggs, as weird as it may seem. The measles vaccine production is based on the use of egg protein, and to ensure the sufficient supply for the medical production, we need high-quality raw materials, and we need access to that. And we didn't ensure that in due time. That's the first point. Now, second point. The decisions have been taken, and I think very soon this will stop being a problem, and a solution will be made. You mentioned the three-component vaccine for measles, rubella, and parotitis, and yes, I think the solution will be found as soon as possible. There is no problem with the vaccination in the vaccine supply. A solution will be found very soon. And by the way, the surge in the measles is seen all over the world, and it happens every 4 years. What is the reason? Unfortunately, the reason is the low level of vaccination in the countries of origin of labor migrants, including Ukraine, since millions of people have moved from Ukraine into Russia. The vaccination level in Ukraine is very low. It was like that, and now it's even lower. And that's an actual problem for us. And there was our own technical issue that we experienced. But I hope, and I was told, and I'm being told by our specialists, that solutions have been found. Yes, we know that a number of companies have left the Russian market, and that is a problem. However, among the vital medications, I think there's a list of 14 positions on the list. And our industry is active. We're not closing down the imports of medication. Our healthcare ministry and the government are aware of the problems. A special commission has been established on the import substitution. The commission is active, and the commission assures me that they understand the situation. They are doing and will do everything to ensure the interests of the people who require certain medications. Speaking of the substitution, yes, sometimes certain medications don't work for a certain person. The industry should be working, the doctors should be working. Sometimes there are certain psychological changes when people get used to a certain type of medication or a certain brand name. But it's important that a person can trust or believe in a certain medication. We will produce our own positions. We will not rely wholly on the imports. The primary healthcare is also important. You are mentioning the large cities and small cities, that there is a lack of doctors and nurses. Let's call Yegor Permina from the Sverdlovsk region, from the Rechtinsky village. Yegor, if you hear us, please ask your question. Hello, distinguished Mr. President. My name is Yegor. I'm from the Sverdlovsk region, Rechtinsky village. We have a problem in healthcare, or rather lack thereof. The authorities are actively pursuing the infrastructure projects, but not the hospitals. The hospitals are in complete ruin. The salaries and the condition are very poor. Most of the buildings were built in the Soviet times, and they're collapsing in front of our eyes. We cannot receive good medical care. We are asking for your help. This was the Sverdlovsk region. I will look into that, definitely. I will see what we can do. This is the village of Rechtinsky, not far from Yekaterinburg. I will write it down. We will deal with that. There is a program. A program for the primary healthcare system. We're allocating quite a big deal of financement. We have already bought 14,000 medical vehicles. We are building the primary care facilities, and I think the volumes are still not enough, and we will extend the program. This is a part of the future presidential program. We will extend the program to ensure the improvement in the primary healthcare system. Yes, we will do that. Much has been done already, in fact. Judging by what we see now, we're not doing enough. Let me repeat. We are aware of the problem, and it is no accident that we created a specialized program to improve the primary healthcare system, and we will continue pursuing it. In this regard, it is most important to pay special attention to that. And the program says this too. We have to pay special attention to the rural areas. More than a half of all the financement of the program goes into the rural primary health care, and we will keep doing that. And we will take your address and your suggestion into account. Let's get back to the journalists. Let's take a question from RT on this side. They're sitting just at the edge, quite unnoticeable. Thank you, Mr. Peskov, Mr. Putin. Thank you, Murat Gazdeev, Russia Today TV channel. A relevant question for us as an international TV channel, and a question relevant for our multinational country. What do you think of the growing nationalism, both in Russia and all over the world? Not just nationalism, but also anti-Semitism. This is not a problem on the front line. In the trenches, we have people all together, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and they all work together. But as soon as you leave the war zone, you see this, both in Russia and all over the world. You see this as a current pressing issue. What should we do, Mr. Putin? You know, there's been a recent public poll by the Russian Center. Please take your seat. The polls say that 96% of the Russian citizens believe that the interconfessional and interethnical agreement in our country is a great competitive advantage of Russia compared to other parts of the world. And it is true. First of all, this is due to, yes, I'll go back to the topic of our traditional values. This is, first of all, due to our traditional values. The traditional belief systems make a great contribution in preserving the situation, in preserving the relations between the various ethnicities and religions. Speaking of the spike in anti-Islamism sentiments, anti-Semitism and Russophobia and other sentiments like that, I must say that it is true that these trends are on the rise. And here's the reason, as I see it. I believe that the people are experiencing certain types of injustice. Take a look at Gaza. All over the Islamic world, there's been a certain reaction, and therefore there has been a surge in the number of people who are quite radical. The growth is apparent. The numbers are growing. There's nothing good about that, rest assured, but still, this is the result of the policy of certain elites. This is the result of the issues of justice, or rather lack of justice for the Palestinian issue for decades. The reaction of the Islamic world, and therefore the growth of certain phobias. This is very bad. In our country, as I mentioned, the confessions, the traditional religions and values play an important role, but still, it is also important to remember that we are pursuing a balanced domestic policy as well as a balanced international policy. And we are doing what we can in order to ensure justice in all the areas, and I believe that the people really appreciate that. And that is why the situation in our country is also balanced. Speaking of anti-Russian sentiment, this is one of the vectors of the fight against Russia. Yes, this is a thing in the world. Domestically, we should do everything to ensure this doesn't appear in our country. We should immediately stop any attempts to destabilize the society from within. That's what we've been doing. TF1, I think, is that the French TV channel? Yes, TF1. In the middle sector, please.
Been in contact for a very long time with Emmanuel Macron. Could you tell us how do you perceive France and its president today? Do you plan to meet him once again? On what terms?
Yes, we have, and we used to have very good working relations with them. I visited France and Mr. Macron visited Russia. We have always had a very rich agenda, both bilaterally and multilaterally. And we are ready to continue our cooperation with France. But at a certain point, the French president ceased all relations with us. We didn't stop it. I didn't. He did. If there's an interest, we're ready to pursue that. If there's no interest, we can do without them. That's it. There's nothing unusual here. We are not avoiding any contacts, rest assured, but if the European countries and the French president in particular are unwilling to talk to us, there is no issue here. If he says no, it's fine for us. We have our own things to do. If they're interested, we are ready. We have the Komsomolskaya Pravda. No, let's go to the Magadan region instead. And please, do not be so loud, or we will have quite a mess here. I'm sorry, but practice shows that this works. Thank you, Alexander Orlov, Kolyma Plus channel, Magadan region. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. President. First of all, let me know that the region of Magadan can really feel the support of the Russian government. We see that the federal projects in our region are being implemented, and this has a positive effect. And this has a positive effect on the attitude of our population towards the president. And this also affects my own sentiments. We all support your decision to run for the election next year. As long as I remember, you've always been in power. I could say it like that. Thank you. Now let me move to the question. The first question is as follows. For our region, it's important to feel connected to the rest of the country. Few people from the Far East and the Magadan region can spend their vacation in their own region. But there are certain difficulties. Magadan has 3 subsidized travel directions to Petropavlovsk, to Blagoveshchensk, and to Moscow. However, Khabarovsk and Novosibirsk are not part of the subsidized travel programs, and a single trip can take over 24 hours. And it can be quite costly for us. For example, it's much cheaper for us to come to Moscow rather than to Khabarovsk, which is very close to us. And people like me, who have no children, have no disabilities, and those who are older than 22 do not get any discounts. I suggest that you get some children to get your discounts. That's the solution, I think. Then you will have access to the reduced rates. You're such a nice young man. I don't think you'll have issues. Oh, thank you. So, coming back to my question, would it be possible to expand the number of subsidized travel routes from the Far East? I think this would also help us improve the tourism. So that's the first question. And the second one, I think everyone from the North and the Far East can tell that we also receive the additional benefits to our salaries. That's no secret, and the regions are choosing their own benefits. But overall, it takes about 5 years to get the maximum benefits.
We people who were born and who work in the Far East, as well as the experts that come to this region, have to reach this coefficient. We do not receive it. Can we return to the legislation that existed before? Those who were born in the Far East and in the extreme North could receive this coefficients. Could we return to that legislation? Yes, I understand this question. It is being discussed in the government. This is what I would do. I wouldn't wait for the term or for working or living in the region. It would make people stay in the Far East, which is useful for the country, and Russia needs it. This is just the problem of the fiscal capacities and the federal budget. We will think about that. I'll ask the government to return it to the agenda. As for the plane tariffs, they will be prolonged. It is usually done at the end of the year after my consultations with Aeroflot, first of all, and other companies, with the Ministry of Transport. We will prolong these tariffs. I understand you very well. It would be good to widen them. It will require additional financing from the budget. We will think about this, but we will prolong it, rest assured. But the volume is enormous, and the Far East is an entire world, separate world. It's the distances are so big that it is really hard to move around the region, but we'll try to solve this problem. Thank you. I see Veliki Novgorod. There is a woman sitting there, and, well, she acted like she has nothing to do with it. Natalia Khmelyova, the regional TV. We have a question about healthcare in our region. The situation is improving. We are buying equipment. Young experts are being supported, but a considerable part of mortality is connected to the cardiac diseases, heart diseases. There is a question about federal program. Maybe we could create a federal program to create heart centers in this region. It could be very good for our regions, and I think our other regions will support us. We cannot do it without federal support. I'll talk to Sergei Nikitin, with the governor and with the Ministry of Healthcare. Maybe we will not create a separate program for heart diseases. We have a special program for oncology, and it is functioning. But heart diseases is one of the problems, one of the reasons of high mortality. We will look into that. The first thing we need to do is to prolong the program related to the development of the primary health care. And maybe in this program we will have special programs, small programs for the people with the risks of such diseases, to treat them, to provide rehabilitation. We'll look into that. Minister of Healthcare is really concerned about heart diseases and is working on this issue actively. And now the mortality rate is getting lower. We'll look into that. Komsomolskaya Pravda, please give the microphone. Alexander Gamov, Komsomolskaya Pravda, radio and website. Thank you for supporting the initiative of Mr. Zanin, a military correspondent who is now in Donbass. He proposed to use the authority, the experience, and the knowledge of the heroes of the special military operation to be used, to use it in the patriotic education of our children. Well, my question is, why, Mr. President, we need a new history book for teaching at schools? What is the difference? Oh, well, this is the first question. Next year, we are going to celebrate 80 years of the end of Leningrad blockade, 10 years since the reunification with Crimea. In the 2025, 80 years of the Great Patriotic War. Personally, for you, what all of these events mean? Well, and as I have a microphone in 2025, it will be 100 years of Komsomolskaya Pravda, and we invite you for the anniversary. Maybe you could ask your press secretary to include it into your schedule, and we will wait for you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Well, we'll have to wait for the 2025. Historically, it's not so far away. But if we're speaking about a person, it's quite far away, but thank you. As for the anniversaries, I'm sorry, it's because of the air conditioning. As for the anniversaries that you mentioned, it's not only for me, but all the people in Russia, all people of the former USSR, all of this is of great significance for almost every Russian family. This also has a personal meaning. For instance, in the cemetery of Peskarova in St. Petersburg, my elder brother is buried. I have never seen him because I was born much later. But it is also meaningful for me personally. Well, the first part, what was it about? You were thanked for supporting the initiative by Sergei Zenin. I just thanked you on behalf of Komsomolskaya Pravda for supporting Sergei Zenin and his initiative. Those who fight in the special military operation should be used in for peaceful objectives. They could go to schools. For instance, it would be very good for patriotic education of children. I cannot add anything because wars are won by teachers. If you're speaking about education and about those who have risked their lives fighting in the war, fighting for our motherland, it's very important. In Leningrad, we had teachers who participated in the Great Patriotic War. And we had a lot of respect to them, to what they said, how they behaved. This is the greatest example. and we're going to use this opportunity. And another question was about the history book. Why do we need this? There were 60,000 or 65,000 versions, and in many of these books, and those the Russians will understand, because we were speaking about the anniversaries related to the Great Patriotic War. In many books, there was anything. There could be anything. For instance, the significance of the Second Front. But nothing was said, or almost nothing was said, about the significance of the Stalingrad battle. Is it all right? We need a fundamental public state version that should be presented to everyone and should be used by everyone, those who print it, those who read it. Because first we're speaking about children and then about citizens. It's extremely important. We needed this school book. And there were questions, there were those who were criticizing it. All right. Yes, teachers and scientists should together work on this. Or they also should work with the parents. They should think about this, develop it, introduce changes, knowing the realities, the relevant ones of what is happening now, preserving a good approach to the historical events of our country, because we had, as any country, many internal problems. So we should be kind about that. And all these school books should be truthful. They shouldn't serve any other's interests. Well, this is something new for a direct line. The people stopped saying that they have problems with the roads. Instead, they're saying that everything is good. For instance, they're speaking about the highway to St. Petersburg and others. But people have many questions about riding over roads where you have to pay, and the prices are very high. Why is it so expensive? And we have a call. Hello, Mr. President. My name is Sergey. I have from Moscow. I have a question about tariffs for a road between Moscow and Kazan. The tariff on this highway for a car is around 7 rubles for a kilometer, and it will be 6,000 rubles for going from Moscow to Kazan, and this is costly. Before, Avtodor was saying that it will be 4 rubles for a kilometer, and it would cost 3,000 or 4,000 rubles to go from Moscow to Kazan, and I think it's reasonable. Please, Mr. Putin, could you give orders to the organisms that are responsible for that to ensure reasonable prices for tourists? Thank you very much. Sergey, yes, is it your name? Yes, it is. Sergey, well, I don't know why you're speaking about this figure, 6,000 rubles. Was it published? For instance, if we multiply it, we receive 5,600 rubles to go from Moscow to Kazan. Well, the price should be 4,500 rubles. I will check it. Maybe we shouldn't just multiply it. I will check it. Thank you for the question. If we're speaking about Crimea, it costs less than 4,000 rubles, and the distance is very long. As for St. Petersburg, it's also 4,500 rubles. Well, it's very good that those who live in Moscow think about Kazan. It's so harmonious. I'll repeat. I do not understand Why are you speaking about 6,000 rubles? Because it was promised to have 4,000. Yes, I understand, but that is what we received, multiplying it. Thank you very much. In general, toll roads can be toll roads only if there is an alternative, because there is an opportunity to not pay for the road and go for free. But those who construct roads try to do everything to make them not so costly. For instance, there is a bridge that is going to be built, and before that there was a ferry. It will cost 270 rubles to go over this bridge. So I'll ask those who construct roads to work in this direction. I will check it.
Mr. President, since we've started talking about roads, when we came here with Pavel, traffic jams, rush hour, plenty of Chinese cars. It's a true expansion, so to speak. And experts are saying that almost 60% of our market have been conquered by the Chinese cars. They're not cheap, however, ours are also on par with them. And our citizens are asking why the prices for Russian cars are exorbitant. I think they have increased by 40%. Well, basically, there are no middle-class cars, nothing under 1 million rubles available. Well, 40% is quite a lot as well, I understand. I think it's unnecessary to explain everything, but still, if there is such a question, I'll explain. When the European brands left Russian market, European, South Korean, and Japanese as well, there were several issues at hand. They left with spare parts as well. And the question was about developing our own industry. I have to say that Russian Avtovaz is coping with the quantity. But the more they produce, the lower the price. Some costs have to do with the fact that this way or another, the producer is getting international spare parts, but at a different price. That is leading to extra costs. Besides, a small amount of cars produced. The greater the amount, the less it will cost. I think that Avtovaz is following this path, and I hope it will bring about a decrease in prices. But most importantly, we need to create our own platforms and develop them. We have Avtovaz and other producers. They're doing that, but it takes time. I'd like to hope, and I'm even positive that this will take place and the prices will go down. The second very important matter is creating our spare part production, our own, because we have over-trusted, so to speak, our so-called partners. And the spare parts industry has been completely lost. And we need to rebuild it. And our industrial ministry is doing that. This task is being solved. I'm trying to be very cautious, because if I say it will happen tomorrow, but they won't manage to do it, they will say that I've promised something and didn't deliver. But I'm trying to assure you that our industrial ministry is working very actively, as well as producers, and I'm happy that we'll achieve that. And Lada Granta is under 1 million rubles. A 40% growth is quite a lot. Everyone wants to have an Rs, I think. It's very expensive. Well, it's been produced in very small amounts. However, it's been produced abroad as well, in the United Arab Emirates. The assembly is located there. Our Emirati friends like that car, along with other producers as well. We have a range of limousines and sedans and jeeps and buses, and we have it all, but we just need to start. We need to have serial production, then the price will go down, but it takes time. Mr. Peskov, you have the floor. In any case, you know, what I would like to highlight is that those who thought that will collapse, I think they're disappointed. Nothing collapsed. As for Chinese cars, right? Our Chinese friends, they know what happens. It's typical not only for Russia. Chinese producers are very active on global markets, and they've started to substitute European brands, including in the European markets. Look at what's happening in car manufacturing cities, for example, in Wolfsburg. Unfortunately, the situation is deteriorating there. E-cars are being produced and sold more and more. American plants are being opened there. Where are the interests of European and especially German car manufacturers? That is unknown. Several years ago, there was an attack conducted against Volkswagen, and it was very detrimental. So what does the government do to defend their traditional car manufacturing industry, German and European? Well, they did nothing. They were left to their own devices. The Chinese government is working very actively in supporting their car manufacturing industry, and they're pressuring the Europeans away from the markets. It's happening not only in Russia. The quality is on the rise as well, and the price-quality ratio gives an opportunity to our drivers to choose what they want. We'll be working on that together. A young man straight ahead of me. He's raising his hand. Yes, it's you. No. Mr. President, well, it's too late. I wanted to give the floor to a different one. I'm very sorry. Yes, please, go ahead. Yes, I'm very sorry. Slaga Novgorod region, Veliki Novgorod. I'm talking about the power transmission lines which have been built post-war. They have become outdated. Right now, the transmission lines at 70% of their capacity, and just with a little snowfall, whole regions can be left without power, with thousands of people left without power. That happened in December 2021, and some people were left without power for 2 or 3 weeks. Andrei Nikitin, the governor, spoke to you, increasing the capacity of the grid. You supported his appeal. In 2022, an agreement was signed between Rosseti company and the government of the region. 6 billion rubles were earmarked for that. They were going to update transmission lines and to buy the necessary equipment. Since then, more than a year passed and nothing changed. I wanted to ask you how soon the energy sector will start delivering on your promise and we can improve our grid. Rosseti are working rather actively all over the country. What was planned specifically, 6 billion rubles, I won't lie to you, I don't know what was planned there. I'll take a look at that. Naturally, I'll talk to the leadership of Rosseti and with the governor. We'll try to help people to support the implementation of the plan. We have a tremendous grid in Russia. I mean our tremendous territory. Well, this is the European part of the country. Yes, there were some shortcomings, and it is snowing very strongly. They have certain plans per region and territories. I'll find out, and we'll speak with Andrei Nikitin for sure. I'll try to help you. Yes, the young man, please. Yes. Go ahead. Mr. President, my name is Alexander Zarubin. I'm known as Alexander Stone. I'm an actor from Gazprom RD Holding inside People Production Center. I'm a blogger. Right now, the sphere is developing rapidly, especially in the recent years. It experienced tremendous growth. Information, new platforms, opening up, closing down, and so on and so forth. I wanted to ask you a question about the future of our sphere. What I personally can do for us to continue working and developing, creating, so that our work would be completely transparent, so there won't be any questions to us. Well, if there are no questions, well there is no conversation then. Well, this is a free sphere, right? It's very free. The most important thing is for the state not to stand in your way. If that's happening, tell us. We'll try to amend it. But if everything is developing the way you think is the right way, well, God give you strength and health. We'll try to create the atmosphere and the situation for the development of the blogging sphere. The only thing I'd like to ask is just a wish. We understand that there is responsibility for people who are working in this sphere, because there is no control from the state, no oversight, but we need to have an understanding of corporate ethics and self limitation. You know what I'm talking about. It has to do with ethics, safety, safety of children, and so on. It's very clear. It's very understandable. So it's better when a professional community is organizing itself, just like that happened in high tech and so on and so forth. If you have certain wishes, please put them on paper. We'll try to respond. I can hear. There are people who gain popularity very fast, but they don't have people who have experience with businesses. They don't know how to register themselves as entrepreneurs, how to pay taxes. There are a lot of young people. They don't feel this responsibility. So what I would like to have is that for a majority of people who are working as bloggers, to have certain hints for them to be shown the ropes, and we'll be treating our work responsibly and continue to create. Yes, to have chaperones, guidance, to have guidance, that is very important. You have highlighted something that should be a government priority. I've heard you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe one more question from the audience, because I see Mir. Mir is a tremendous CIS space. Thank you very much, Mr. Peskov. Good afternoon, Mr. President and colleagues. Elena Dashkoeva, Mir Company. In 2024, the chairmanship in CIS goes to Russia. And in Bishkek on the 13th of October, you said that Russia intends to work actively to follow up and support the authority of the Commonwealth. But the thing is that Moldova is saying that they possibly will leave the Union, the Commonwealth, and Armenian Prime Minister Mr. Pashinyan is ignoring the summits of CIS, CSTO, and Eurasian Economic Union. How critical is the situation of Yerevan for the CSTO? And in general, how do you evaluate the integration associations in post-Soviet space? Thank you. We're building all of our integration plans, and I mean Russia, purely on the basis of it being voluntary and mutually beneficial. As for Eurasian Economic Union, there is consistently growing trade. Capital labor markets are opening up, the flow of workforce, supporting of mutual cooperation, efficient use of Soviet heritage, meaning we have one transportation infrastructure and so on, that we have the language of international and ethnic communication. Mr. Tokayev presented an initiative to create an international association to support the Russian language, and we're thankful to him for that. These conditions are increasing our competitive edge on global markets. and also helps solve issues in not only in economy, but as an end result in social sphere and improving the welfare of our citizens. If Moldova does not want to be a part of that process, well, that means that this is the choice of their leadership. Let it be so. Moldova is one of the poorest countries in Europe. Quite recently, it was the poorest country in Europe. Now, Ukraine has taken over this honorable spot. Well, if the poorest country in Europe is teaching us, or is receiving energy at low prices from Russia, and if it wants to follow the example of Germany, where they're receiving U.S. energy at 30% higher rates than previously from the Russian Federation, well, if they have some extra money, let them do so. The same applies to other dimensions, for example, agriculture.
The produce markets are used. The Russian market is a desired destination for the Moldovan farmers, and you know, in Europe, the so-called allies of Ukraine cut off their supplies, agricultural supplies, preventing the supplies from entering their soil. They just block roads for the Ukrainian cargo operators. They have their own interests. Where shall the Moldovans sell the produce of theirs? At a certain point, they stated they would decline to buy our gas, but actually they have continued buying it. Let them act as they want, as they please. Actually, would not see a lot of value of this nation being present as a member of the CIS, but we are not turning them down. If they want to cooperate, we are eager also. If not, it's up to them. As regards Armenia, there are some complex developments around Karabakh. But it wasn't us who declined Karabakh, abandoned Karabakh. It was the Armenians who accepted Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, and they hadn't informed us that they were going to make this decision. I'm just stating this fact. There are both advantages and drawbacks to that, but it so happened they have very difficult and complex domestic political developments there. I do not think that it would be in Armenia's interest to withdraw from CIS, CSTO, and other structures, the Eurasian Economic Union, but at the end of the day, nations are to make their own choices. As regards the absence of the Armenian Prime Minister at joint events, as to our knowledge, this has to do with some of the domestic developments in Armenia. It is not about whether they want to continue working within these integration groups or not. We have many questions. Small and medium enterprises is a relevant topic. These people helped Russia survive through the sanctions. Vasily Babin-Sofizhevsk, a video phone in. Mr. President, good afternoon. My name is Vasily. I am from Udmurtia. I represent Bangli Boo brand, producing garments for adults and children, such stylish combos. And the other day, we won the contest No Hours from the Strategic Initiatives Agency. And we have been able to receive promotion and ramp up our revenues and sales. Another company, Splav, produces tourist clothes. With the start of a special operation, they have been able to ramp up their sales because of the military and servicemen and the mobilized ones. This is a happy coincidence, as it seems, but the question is whether we can, in the current context, shape the system of support for the Russian brands and entrepreneurs so that it should not be one-off chances. Well, you have mentioned that you have succeeded to increase your sales as well as your partners, also your colleagues. Well, the Bank and the Strategic Initiatives Agency have been pursuing support measures, and this Agency for Strategic Initiatives has the backing of the government, and they opened a call for national grants.